Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Yeah, they say that everybody has a story. And wait till you hear this guy's story, his background. He's a noted architect in the New York area, has been for many, many years, designing commercial and residential structures, buildings, offices, businesses. But he also was a tennis pro before that when he was in his 20s. I'm talking about John Riggio, and he's back with us on the program. Hey, John, how you doing?
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Doing great. Last time we talked, you were playing the Japanese team as a tennis pro. And, for anybody that may have missed what we had talked about, you were connected to Hillary Clinton at the time because I think I have this right, but she was an attorney, of course, along with her husband being the president, but she represented you or represented your sponsors at that time?
Yes, she represented myself and solved all the problems with my sponsors, and also took care of things like my salary. At one point, there was the last time I left off was about talking about my salary and taking some money out of the income I was making, because before, most of the money, all of it was really going back into the tournaments. It was paying for tournaments. So at this point, I asked to have $50,000 taken out, but it turned out it wasn't just $50,000. It turned out to be $125,000, and I also was able to find that my salary was increasing over the years. It just went all the way up to $375,000 for the year. This is a good salary, and that was going up from about $300,000 at Sutton East, and so this it involved taking out about $125,000 of the money, and the money was taken out of the official salary. It was fully taken out. Some of the money was put into fees and things like that. It paid for lawyer fees, paid for some shareholder fees, things like that. And I think the whole thing with the shareholders at this time also was clear and sort of came out that the shareholders were helping my overall income. So this whole thing with adding people on from the previous account was working very good. It was increasing my salary. I was getting some extra money out of it, so that was working good. And they were benefiting too, of course, by investing in my tennis playing. So that was starting to become clear what's happening. I think the next thing that was happening, which was very interesting, was the next step of making money with the sports and really bringing it home to spend it, was really having an agent. Officially, you really would need to have an agent to collect this kind of money. It's sort of like having a lawyer. They would have insurance. They'd have an agent license. Maybe a lot of people didn't know yet. Agent has to have a license too, and they would collect the money, and then they would give it to me, and of course they would get a percentage of the amount of money they would get from this whole the whole thing with my contract. And I was reading about some agents, and sometimes they negotiate also income, try to increase and things like that. So that was the next stage, was finding an agent.
As somebody that was in their 20s and just you were playing tennis since you were, I think you said 9, 10, around there, and kind of really kicked up at 13. In your 20s, now you're making some serious cash. And back then, we're talking in the mid to late 80s, these numbers were big. They're big now for somebody that age, and then they were so much bigger. How much of that money did you get to even see? We say 125,000, but parts of that had to go to legal fees and sponsorship and things like that. But did you ever actually get to see a paycheck and say, okay, this is mine, or keep any of it or see any of it back then?
As far as the money from that contract, I didn't really get too much money. And almost all the time, the money would always get reinvested back into tournaments. But I think so at this point, I wasn't really getting that money from there. And I think over the time, they did reimburse me for some things like travel expenses, things like that. That would be just a direct debit from money I was already spending. So I didn't really have to earn the money to do those basic things like travel expenses, things like that.
Sure.
And And then, of course, I had already gone over all the different things like equipment and supplies that were given to me. I didn't have to pay for any of those things. But as far as this part of getting the money from my income that was mostly getting put back into tournaments, extra tournaments, this was something new and required really an agent to collect the money. But I wasn't really living off that money. There was all kinds of different possibilities too that they were going through at that time, that would give me like financial stability of starting to bring home a smaller amount of money per year. That'd be more like a salary instead of taking a big chunk of the money out. But I think this payout worked pretty good because it paid off all my lawyer fees. It paid off all of money went to the different shareholders, and then the 50,000 was going over uh, to really my girlfriend Delilah and her father, but they want to get married, and this was, and then of course he was going to take the money, and I would then legally be able to collect some money as him as an agent.
Okay.
He would give me some money as that he is a legal and official agent, and that's where we had left off with that.
I
So
want to
that
ask, I want to ask you a question and just get inside your mind as that 20-year-old. And the reason I ask this question is when I was in my low 20s, I started doing what I wanted to do. Like you as a tennis pro. I got the job I wanted. It was, started really young. Back then, I don't really care what they paid me. I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm young, and it's like this is the best thing in the world. They're paying me something. Did you think that as well, or did you say to yourself, you know what, I should be making more money, or I should be keeping more of that? What were you thinking back then?
Yeah, I didn't demand any money at this time, but I think I was slowly getting into this understanding of how to make money, that there was also a base salary that could be issued. And there were all kinds of things like that. One of them was also getting more support. So at this point, I had an excellent lawyer. We're going through all these different things. Then it turns out the next thing really was to really find an agent for this kind of money to come through,
Hmm.
and it would go to an agent. That's really the correct way for the money to get transferred over to me. So that was the next step in progressing as far as that is concerned. But as far as the money, I didn't ask for any money, and they always gave me all different things like the tennis equipment, reimbursement for travel, things like that. So I didn't have those problems.
Gotcha.
And I also had they encouraged going to college and having a career to make some money. So I was already working on that too. So my idea was, from what they had told me, was some money would come from my uh, income after I graduated college, because I was graduating in 1992, and then the money for tennis, they really didn't tell me all the different things, but I was slowly learning about things like agents and things like that. At that point, what happened was the inner circle there around me were people, entertainers that had contracts for like $25 million. So I made friends with one of them, Anna, and she already had an agent and everything, and she in fact referred me to some agents as this thing was going on to learn about the whole thing with the agents, getting a licensed agent. And then I think from that point, the Delilah's father saying that he could pick up the agent, that he was already an agent for the daughter's career. So that
Wow.
was what was happening. So I was learning about all these new things. This was really a next step in really going forward. And this is also at that time I was starting to get close to graduation. I'm turning 24 years old. It's also going into year 1992, and that's my graduation year was 1992, and so that is where things were starting to move forward.
Wow. With the ATP, how did the ranking system work, or was there no ranking? I can't remember going back.
Yes, one interesting thing about the ATP and the ranking is that this time I'm playing with the Ross Pro Company. I'm doing all these tournaments, but the ATP officially doesn't issue any rankings. And I learned this from really just to go back and tell the story of when I was at Sutton East. Now, at Sutton East, I played this tournament called the American Airlines Tournament. it is really like the number one tournament in the US. It's about the same type of level of playing like the Manhattan Open, which I talked about once before. And this was a really big tournament. I played this tournament and I was able to win the tournament, which is really good. And this was really a top tournament. And at that same time, I was also given the ATP award of the most winning player. So what happened is the ATP sent a representative there. They sent one of their top administrators to talk to me and congratulate me. So I met with the top administrator. They congratulated me. And we discussed some things about the tennis rankings and things like that, because they knew I won the American Airlines Open. They knew I was given this award. And the award for the also ATP Player of the Year, I was a finalist in that. I think they selected someone else for because of seniority, but I was like one of the one. Like if he didn't get the award, then they'd probably give it to me. But I was a lot younger at the time. And so I was also up for that award too. It was the ATP Player of the Year award in total. So the ATP official, they tell me that the ATP doesn't officially give any rankings at the top. And it sort of works by as you work your way up through coaches and things like that, that they were issuing ranking numbers to me, that at the very top, they don't really have an official number. So I talked to them about who I had beaten, who I won matches against, that they know that other people are saying they're number one. And it turns out that yes, they agreed that I was number one player. They when I was telling them who I was winning matches against, they did not say I wasn't the number one player. They agreed with it, and they hoped I would get a lot of years of experience too. They wish I would continue to have years of experience, so I can maybe even get the ATP Player of the Year award with a little more experience. And that is what they had told me. And they also was saying something very interesting, that the tennis magazine in particular, because they have like magazine publications like Tennis Magazine, World Tennis Magazine, maybe Sports Illustrated, we'll talk about tennis. And the tennis magazine was not the official word of the ATP. And they explained to me that that was a problem, because the ATP the tennis magazine and World Tennis Magazine is sort of becomes like an advertising game. It's sort of a game between coaches submitting names, numbers, and people paying for advertisements. And it wasn't necessarily all the players achieving. And they had a problem with that. They were even hoping maybe even to buy over Tennis Magazine so that problem would stop. Wow. In fact, over the years, I never complained about Tennis Magazine or World Tennis Magazine. I had a lot of different people submitting my name, trying to get advertisements in there. A lot of times they said they were submitted. I didn't find all of them, but they said that they were submitted to different magazines like World Tennis Magazine or Tennis Magazine, Times Magazine. They also have sport publications like in New York City, where they have like the Times newspaper, Times Magazine. It has a sports section, and I think pictures and things like that were said to have been published. So I didn't complain about this.
I want to get this clear, John, and I think it's been called in different other areas pay for play. So in other words, people were paying to get that visibility in Tennis Magazine or World Tennis Magazine, but they really didn't attain a certain level. It was all about money propelling them in there. Am I getting that right? Does that sound about right?
I think what was happening, and as far as talking to the ATP administrator, is that what you see in Tennis Magazine might just be indications of what's going on, but there is a whole world of tennis players. In fact, that a lot of people are hoping I was on the cover of Tennis Magazine like back in 1985, that they wanted me to really have like a lot of more notoriety, more publications and things like that. But they know it's really like a game of getting things into the magazines. It isn't necessarily what's really happening in the tennis playing altogether. And sometimes people could get upset about that. I think one thing that's worse that I didn't get into yet, sometimes people claim they won a tournament and they put it in writing, and then another player says that he was the one that really won the tournament, and sometimes it goes to a lawsuit, and there could be problems about it. So that's a similar idea with Tennis Magazine, that people might get in the publications, but it doesn't necessarily mean what's going on with the tennis. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with enjoying playing tennis, enjoying playing the tournaments, and being profitable. I think I was able to always cover all those things. They always gave me a lot of things with tennis centers, tennis courts, playing on them, things like that. And so things was always going very good. I wasn't necessarily all alone. I always had people there, like at the SUNY Westbury location. They had all kinds of new people coming to meet me, people that were at the same level of contracts, with $25 million contracts or above. And that is so I was meeting new people. So I was already getting all kinds of things from playing tennis. The whole thing of putting together the thing with the Tennis Magazine is a big problem. And that's what they explained to me, that they were even hoping to buy over Tennis Magazine to sort of get rid of that problem. Maybe one other thing that was happening. So at the top of the ATP, they noticed a problem with Tennis Magazine, but then also at the local public library, they picked up on the same exact problem, and they banned Tennis Magazine in the public library where I used to live, and some other areas. So on Long Island, the public libraries were banning Tennis Magazine because they were excluding a lot of players that was tourism, and they had a big problem with it. So they really banned the Tennis Magazine.
It seemed almost
because
corrupt.
enough people weren't getting notoriety.
It almost seems corrupt, but then at the same time, part of me says the magazine can do whatever they want. It's like, the whole cliche, it's their sandbox. They can create, they can focus, they can do a story. You can't make a magazine do a story on insert name of tennis player. That's their prerogative. If people want to buy the magazine or not, that's their choice as well. But wow, that's I guess it even goes down to, the ATP not truly having rankings. So there's nothing to stand on there. John should be number one, but the ATP doesn't recognize those type of rankings. This is a lot more complicated in tennis than I ever thought it was. But maybe
I think one thing that was interesting about tennis rankings is that when I made it to the top pro group at a ranking of 500, there was this saying they had that anyone who's a 500 or above player, they always want to keep them in tennis. They all want everyone to play good sportsman tennis, and that everything would really progress really great in everyone's tennis career. That they weren't trying to get rid of them. If you made the 500th player, they want to say that you were in tennis and you were going to stay there playing.
Right.
With tennis for your whole career. And one thing that when I really were able to get to the number one spot and was able to hold it there for a long time, the next thing is who's really in the top five. Probably a lot of people don't know this, but who's really the top five players? So whenever they come to play me, a lot of times we might have a discussion for a few minutes of who is winning against what players. And if you're really like one of the top five players going from the top 500 players. So that was really very interesting to see what was happening when I was really playing at the top position there. It was amazing.
And the other part of it is too, we didn't have obviously social media back then. So when you talk about a magazine, that was a big deal. Being on radio, TV, print, big stuff back then. So even just getting featured in any page of Tennis Magazine back then was huge. That was that's where people went, short of, let's say, watching a tennis match on ABC or watching the sports or something like that. So when you were playing the Japanese team, you had shared that it wasn't just Japanese players. They were all from the Pacific, like the Philippines, Guam potentially was part of it, Taiwan. Why was that? Why wasn't it just the Japanese team had bought out your contract, right?
Yes, it looks like the Pacific team involved other countries. First, the Japanese team showed up first, and they had a coach there that was running the whole thing with the Japanese team, and other countries started to show up. I remember a few of them. Remember there was Indonesia. Remember there was the Philippines. But I think with that there was other countries, probably friendly with the U.S. that were there. I don't remember all of them. If Taiwan was there,
Hmm.
Guam, other countries like that, maybe like Singapore. But there are all kinds of countries did arrive. I remember they used to come in each in a separate bus load of players, and that's why I was playing so many matches per day. I played all of the teams from the Pacific, and I didn't lose any matches. It was
Can we go
unbelievable.
there? How many matches? Let's look at this for a second because I'm trying to get the what your life was like back then. How many matches in a day? The most number of matches in a day that you ever played, full matches. What do you
I
think?
think I played seven, might have been the most number of matches.
Wow, wow. And I mean, you were a young guy, call it like mid-20s back then. Did you physically feel even then kind of beat up after playing, that number of matches?
They really are only supposed to play two matches per day, but
Wow.
since they were there at a limited number of weeks and months, they had to try to fit in all the different matches. So I was there playing. I might have played at least two, four, six, and I think it was most of maybe seven matches in one day, and I was playing all of them. This whole thing with playing the Japan team and winning was another wish of Tony Roach, because Tony Roach in '87 was just discussing my career, my future, my career, and this is another thing that he thought maybe I would end up playing the Japan team, and he hoped that I would play excellent, show that I'm a great player and beat the Japan team. So this is another wish of Tony Roach that I was able to do something like this. And in fact, Tony Roach also submitted officially that he wanted me to play an extra 2 years. So wherever they thought that I would stop early, he wanted to add on an extra 2 years of playing for me, which was a very nice gift.
Wow. Uh, I'm trying to remember how long it takes to play a match. I play occasionally, but that doesn't count because they're over really fast. Is it an hour? What one match on average? How long do you think?
Yes, I think it's usually like an hour and a half. Depends if what the score is.
Wow.
Sometimes the
Yeah.
match could go very quickly. Sometimes it could extend to a whole extra set and things like that. So yeah, about so an hour and a half.
Wow. So yeah, that does put it more into perspective when you're talking about seven matches, and this isn't just leisure play. This is this is the big league, so to speak. So an hour and a half times seven. That's pretty substantial. It's
You
a
figure a quick match would go maybe like an hour's time. So if I was able to win very quickly, it maybe just be an hour. If it
Right.
really extended to an extra set, maybe an hour and a half.
Hey, you're talking, easily, 9 hours of tennis a day. And that's not even the practice. That's, hardcore playing with some of the greatest players on the planet at that time. Plus, you want to make sure you retain your ranking and you're playing to win. Quite simply, this is this is a lot of work. That's pretty amazing when you think of it. Even for, somebody who's 24, that's pretty wild back then. Uh, Weather-wise, when you were playing back then in Japan, what time of the year was that?
Okay, this was in the summertime, heading into the fall.
Interestingly, I'm just digressing for a second, but my son wants to go to Japan, so I've been researching it, and they have an unusual summer. The warmest month is October, where it'll go like 86 degrees, and then the following month, November, it'll be down to like 50 something. It just like bottoms out. Where here in the States, when you're in the colder states, it's kind of like works its way down. So, had been pretty hot when you were playing tennis back then in Japan.
Oh yes, well that was over in SUNY or Westbury. When I was
Oh, that's
playing, they were here. They were here at
oh, they
SUNY or
came
Westbury.
here. Oh, okay.
All those teams arrived here, and they didn't bother with the U.S. Tennis Center. They just came right to the SUNY or Westbury, and
Wow.
that's why when I was talking to those other players from the U.S. Tennis Center, they came over. The top players, they really wanted this thing to go to Japan and play everyone. And this was like they didn't know that they were able to go and play Japan. So all those people never didn't play with them yet. And so they all met back in Japan at the end of '91, going into 1992. And what happened there was so amazing. because what happened is I had said the story of teaching one of the players that is from the Philippines. Now he was a player that they saw maybe was similar to myself, and they saw him as an up and coming player. So I taught him how to play much better. I taught him how to hit the ball better, strategy of playing. And then when he went back to Japan, he went over to Japan to play tennis. He was really from the Philippines. He was able to beat all the top players that were already international players from the U.S. Tennis Center. They all went over there to play in Japan, and they really wanted to get this, experience playing there to see if they could beat them. And this player was playing so amazing that he beat everybody after I taught him how to play great. And this made it where became for a short time that he was like the number 2 player. So I was able to win all those tournaments against the same people, and he was able to win them. And this caused a big problem. So in 1992, my lawyer, Hillary Clinton, gave me a call. She told me that guy from the Philippines is playing so amazing, beating everybody, that they cannot believe it. And they know that I was his tennis teacher, teaching him how to play much better. And what happened from this was really a big revelation. I had gone over the tournament winnings with Hillary, and I was really surprised to find out that a couple of the top players, I remember 1, 2, maybe more, had lied that they won against me. And by doing that, one of the players was even able to say he won a whole tournament and took the trophy. And they even gave him this big trophy, this really big trophy. This tournament was really expensive. It was $50,000 to play the tournament. His coach lied, and they were even able to get the trophy from it. So Hillary Clinton and our sponsors, they had to take serious action against them. So this, like 1, 2, or more players, they had to really find them, their coaches. They had to really take action against them. They were penalized. The trophy from that tournament had to be returned.
Wow.
And it was returned, and I won the tournament, and they gave me credit. And that made it where Hillary Clinton knew that I was really the number 1 player. And this guy that I taught from the Philippines was really, for a short time, he's like the number 2. I didn't really follow his career. I have to check on it to see how his career went, if he was able to stay on top of his game. And maybe he became number 1 in the Pacific there for a while. I don't know. I really have to find out what happened to his playing. But this was, so now from 1987, when I made number 1 spot and won the tennis bubble at Adipan, all the way now to 1992, I was able to hold my ranking, didn't go down, and I think it was proven that I was really in the number 1 spot.
Unbelievable. I got to believe.
I think the only one thing about being the number 1 spot is, I think, like sort of like with boxing and also tennis, is usually other people can claim they're number 1. They could put it on their player card. They could say they're playing a whole list of tournaments and they're really number 1. They put it in Tennis Magazine number 1, but that's what they were talking about. But it's not necessarily completely proven that they are the sole number 1 player. So this proved that I was the number 1 player, and I'm well played across all the way US, Europe, Australia, all the Pacific now. I've been also playing a lot of countries over in the East.
Good for you, John.
The Eastern Europe and different countries, including even Israel. And so I was able to really do very good. And this whole problem that took place was really proved, helping the Philippine player really gave me a bigger boost than probably they'd think, because it made it where it exposed these other players. I was able to get the trophies and the credit for winning those other matches and tournaments, and it showed that I really was holding the number 1 place. So that is helping this Philippine player, really helped myself. It really put me in the number 1 place, and it really did a really good job. And so it was well worth it. I think maybe a lot of people say, why would you help another player? What do you care? You're not going to get anything out of it. But obviously wasn't true. This whole thing showed that I was a top player, And then also my style of playing and my teaching this other student showed that he's able to really start winning matches and then becoming a top player now in the Pacific. And that was really big.
John, you know what it demonstrates? That you do the right thing and the right thing comes back around. And we don't know what happened to that Philippine player. Maybe karma caught up with him. We don't know. I do know we're just about out of time, but fascinating stuff today. Talking about your tennis career. Unbelievable. John Riggio, R-I-G-G-O, johnriggio.com. He's an architect. He's a tennis pro, and he can help you out too if you're looking to make a change to your residential structure or even your business structure, renovate or even rebuild. John, always great having you with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.